Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show, and I'm glad to have you here. If you are new to the show, get subscribed and ring the alertification. Ring the alert and the notification and all that fun stuff. That'd be great. Now, I want to make you aware that we are about to, at the airing of this episode, we are really going to be opening up very soon the applications for the 2025 spring cohort for key holder coaching groups. If you have 2 years or more experience in owning and operating, running your coffee shop, or if you're a roaster slash cafe hybrid, and you've got this need for community, this need for encouragement and insights and outside perspective from people who are also experienced coffee shop owners who are gathered together to help each other succeed, to share in vulnerable conversations, just the life of ownership, the ins and the outs of the operations of the business. And it's been what now 3 seasons of key holder coaching groups, these mastermind groups of coffee shop owners. And it is fantastic to see the evolution of people's businesses and their perspectives on ownership and how they treat themselves, how they care for their staff, how they look at their business. Everything shifts for the better when you seek the wisdom of other people who are seeking your benefit. So that's why I started key holder coaching groups. It's been really great. So the applications are going to be opening soon. If you're interested in being on the list of people who maybe gets in a little bit early to the applications, and want to be considered for membership in this group, we're going to be starting the new cohort in March of 2025 here. So email Chris at keystotheshop.com, and let's just have a conversation, see if this is something that will really help you. I think it will. And I'm excited to talk to you about it. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the great folks over at Arto Brick. Arto Brick is, you can find them at arto.com. They make tiles and stonework for cafes and beautiful spaces. We're also going to be talking a little bit about our other sponsor, that is the Pacific Barista Series, the line of plant-based performance beverages loved by so many around the world. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the episode, but both are really amazing companies. Right now, what I want to do is introduce you to the topic we're going to talk about today. And this is a topic that I've actually talked about before. If you were a part of the mobile coffee webinar that was put on by the one and only Sarah Naylor over at Daybreak Coffee Cart. Sarah has done a lot of work to produce amazing content to help people be successful in operating their own coffee carts. She put on this webinar. She actually has an ebook as well. Check her out on Instagram at Daybreak Coffee Cart. But she invited me to be a part of this webinar and discuss a topic called meaningful hospitality, or operating your business with meaningful hospitality. And so today, what I wanted to do is break down what I shared on that webinar. And, it was 20 minutes or so of presentation. Today, we're going to go a little bit longer because it's my show. I can go long, so that's fine. I want to explore the concepts that I came up with to talk about what meaningful hospitality looks like in a business. And I have 2 books on the shelf behind me. It's the Setting the Table book by Danny Meyer, and then you've got the book Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. And these people, they know each other really well, Danny and Will, because Will used to work for Danny, and Danny sold his 11 Madison Park company to Will and his business partner, and the rest is history. And you can listen to interview we did with Will on the show. We'll link in the show notes to that, which was really fantastic to have him on. I love his perspective and his demeanor and the way he approaches people in business. And one day we'll get Danny on the show. We tried a little bit ago, a few years ago, but maybe now we've we've got to give it another crack, you know? So if you know Danny Meyer, if you're listening, let's talk. Let's get Danny on the show. Anyhow, these books are here for your reference to say, after this conversation, you should read these books. You should study what they say, because this is not just a one-time conversation that you should be having and then you plug in these techniques or these systems. This is a lifestyle. This is something that you have to have as a conviction of who you are and the why behind the what of what you're doing, right? So today, this conversation is about meaning and making it actually a part of the operations of your business rather than just something that you sometimes remember to do or sometimes remember to talk about. And so I'm just going to go through what I shared on this webinar with the audience Sarah Naylor brought together a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was just a week ago at Daybreak Coffee Cart. So let's get right into it. First thing that you have to focus on if you want meaningful hospitality in your business is values, in how you align your energy with your values and focus. So, first of all, we're talking about an alignment of values with business goals to say we are going to accomplish certain things in our business and we're going to do it this way. How you devise your operational values will determine the decisions that you make in your business in the future, because it's a framework, it's a lens, it is something, it's a filter that you put your own thoughts through and the thoughts of other people, because let's just face it, everyone's got a great idea for your business and they're not all great. And you have a lot of great ideas for your business and they're not all great. How do you determine what good is, what great is? You have to have a filtering system that you have, without the pressure of business, thought through and said, does this line up with our value of community or sustainability or teamwork or integrity, or our definition of professionalism? That is going to help you when you're devising meaningful hospitality, because then every action you do on the stage of the business, and it is a stage, it's a performance, it is a microcosm of life that is meant to be a supplement and an enhancer of the life of the individual who participates in it, that is the customer. And so we have to uh, show hospitality first by having a plan. Having a plan for a play on a stage means you know your lines, you know the character, you say, what's my motivation? What is your motivation? If you're the actor in this scenario, you got to know everything so well and the why behind all of it, and you've got to be paying attention to what everyone else is doing as well. It is a part of what brings it all together and makes it work together. So these values, they can't just be platitudes. Um, they can't just be things that you saw somebody else had and you thought it was really good. You've got to really think them through and say, this is actually how we want to think and behave in a way that is, um, we think, the highest form of action and intention for our brand, for our company, while we're operating this business. And usually I recommend people have operational values that describe how they are interacting with each other, with the customer, and with the space and product. And that means, and when you say customer, you could say community as well. But those three things are a really great way to say, well, you've got a value here that says teamwork or something. Well, how does that relate to those three categories? And really get verbose about this. Really think through. Have a very clear vision, a very crystal clear, like that's what excellence looks like. And that's going to help focus you, and it shapes the behavior, it shapes your culture, because you're constantly hearkening back to something that, Danny Meyer talked about this. You're moving the salt shaker back to the center of the table means you're always in the operation of a business inviting the world to shift the ideal that you have presented to it. Your job is not to get mad at the shifting, but to rearrange and shift back. And the more hands on you are in that process, in the more you embrace that as a joyful responsibility that you get to do, then the better you're going to be at it and the closer you're going to hit. So you aim small, miss small, so to speak. Um, the thing I really want to focus on here with meaningful hospitality, though, related to values, I think is that you have now the ability to recognize when things go right and when things go wrong. And the reason why you can know that is because you've focused so much attention on what excellence looks like, that when you fall short of that, you recognize it and you're like, oh, well, what can we do to bring this closer to the standard that we have for our drinks, for how we handle a customer who's confused, how we handle staff members who are, not pulling their weight on a shift. I mean, there's endless and sometimes very emotional things that come up in the cafe when it comes to circumstances you have to navigate. And if you don't have these things, it's hard to recognize how you're supposed to fix it. You know something is wrong, but you don't know where you're going. When you want to fix it, you're saying, well, what's the standard? If you haven't set the standard, if you don't have those values, then you can't really bring somebody back to a thing that you've never introduced them to. So first you got to introduce yourself to it, and then you've got to introduce others to it, and then we all have to collectively say yes to it. Now when we study the actual, the real McCoy, right, like people who study a dollar bill, the actual US minted dollar bill, when somebody is trying to find the fake one, they're not studying the fake one. They know the difference because they've studied the real one. The real one is what they're used to seeing. They know all the intricacies, so they can spy out a counterfeit. You give yourself the ability to recognize when great hospitality happens. And I will tell you this: if you recognize when things are going not the way you want them to, and you're quick to be like, okay, listen, let's figure that out. We got to get back up to speed. You've got to be just as quick, if not quicker, to recognize and reward and celebrate when things are going the way that they should go. And it's easy to get in this mindset of, well, that's the way it should be, so we're just going to accept that, but we're going to save our loudest and most emotional and theatrical reactions to the negative things. If you're not reacting to, if you're not affirming the positives, you're going to overdo the negatives. And so that's just a word of warning there. So you want meaningful hospitality? It can't have meaning unless it has direction. It can't have direction unless it has goals. And those goals really have to be born from something greater than just glomming onto a trend or something that's really quick. You have to kind of fight for it. And in today's day and age, it's really easy to pursue easy. It's easy to pursue automatic. Fill in the blank, let AI do it. I would encourage you to put that garbage where it belongs, in the garbage can, because it doesn't really serve you that well. Okay. Now, next thing is we got to really talk about the meaning of meaningfulness, right? A little bit. Not, it's a little meta, but the first thing is service. This is maybe old hat now. Service is different than hospitality. Service is what you do. Hospitality is how you do it. You can put the lid on for the customer, but you can do it in such a way that it makes the customer feel as though you wanted to just flatten their drink when you're putting the lid on. Guilty. I've been the passive aggressive barista. I've been the aggressive barista as well. I understand the mindset and the mind space that people get into, but that is bad hospitality. But it is a service. I did the thing, but I did it in a way that makes the person feel as though I did it to them and not for them. So we're quoting a lot of kind of the same kind of things you get from setting the table. And I think that's on purpose because it crystallized a lot of the thoughts that we had behind what we were instinctively doing. If you were of the kind of mindset that said, I know that what I did was wrong. In fact, I know for a fact that we who have transgressed the hospitality code the honor code. We know what we should be doing, but we let ourselves make that call of speaking a certain way or acting a certain way in the moment. Even we know what we're doing is wrong. We're fallible people. We're not perfect people, but we know, and we that's a good thing. You feel that conviction of like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Now you have a choice at that moment. You can say, well, how can I prevent that from happening in the future? Well, first of all, you can't just blame other people for the way you decided to put into action words or actions. You have to take some radical ownership over yourself and say, well, I was the one who chose to do the thing. So in the future, I can be a little more mindful, a little more intentional, and choose to do something different according to what I know the values of my company are and what I personally think should be the high road for me as an individual, right? So even if your company doesn't have a set of values, you as a coffee pro can cultivate a certain sense of personal values that you bring to work with you, that you get from inspirational sources outside of the job. Now, don't go getting upset because other people don't follow it. You have to do what you can with what you have, where you are, for how long you need to be there. Okay. But the thing is, we have to, like I said earlier when we first started this, we have to kind of be about that life. It's a lifestyle. It's a study of who I am at work, because who I am at work often is different than who I am with my friends, who I am with my family. There's a certain thing I turn on. It's not disingenuous. Just as much as I might speak to my son or to my wife or to my friends or to a crowd at Coffee Fest in different ways, am I just being two faced, three faced, four faced? No, there are different parts of who I am in that context that I am bringing because the context calls for it. So you have to accept that and study how you show up. And if we're in this game of blaming the context for how we're not developing, we're never going to get there. It's very convenient too, because then it's everybody else's fault. It's not ours. So let's own the idea that hospitality is a decision that we make about the things that we do. Now, you can also create systems that provide opportunity for service that is very much a caring act for the customer. And then it becomes hospitality when you can figure out how to care, how to bring that the spirit behind the word, so to speak. So now, the idea of meaningful hospitality is one of building trust. This is something I talked about as well, where you build trust with people over time. You don't demand, you can't really demand trust from people, just as much as I don't think beyond a certain kind of common human respect, I don't have to respect you as a professional beyond a certain reasonable point until you've proven to me that you like can. So my respect for you as a professional doesn't mean that you're going to be a manager day one. You've got to prove yourself over time. Like I have to see your character in action. Just as much as a new coffee shop struggles to gain momentum and added business because the public, the community says, well, we're going to give the new coffee shop a try. I think I like it. And I think I really do like it. I know I like it. I think they'll like it. As see, it kind of layers on. You're building trust credit because people are factoring in a lot of different things when they walk into your shop. They're thinking, is the place clean? Are they prompt? Are they friendly? Is it quality? Is it consistent? Do I feel good about this? And do you remember when I said we all kind of know when we've transgressed something in the moment that we're doing it? We kind of watch ourselves. Maybe this is just me, but you kind of watch yourself enter into jerk mode. I think customers know that about themselves too. And so even if a customer is having a bad day and you give a wonderful rendition of service and hospitality to them, it can feel like it doesn't go anywhere. But I have been chagrined many times as a customer where I was flustered by something, and then the people were so sweet, kind, and I was just having a bad day. I went away feeling way better about them than I did myself. Now they might have seen me and said, "Oh, well, that we feel insecure about our service or our hospitality, win that person over. Trust me, if you've done as much as you can, and it still can't overcome the groundswell of irritation that came from that person having a flat tire that day, or their kid won't talk to them, or who knows what people are going through. Apply some empathy and just keep the faith. Keep doing the right thing. And that even in that moment where it feels like it wasn't as rewarding to see that person respond to your hospitality, it's in there. They remember, and it will accrue to your credit over time. That's where meaning is developed. That's where the roots go down deep. But if all you do is the rote service, memorized, scripted, robotic service, it's not going to go down deep with people. It's not going to connect with them. We talked with Armin over at Arto Brick about this, where he wants to build or help people build, literally build intentional spaces where people can connect. That's what happens in hospitality versus service. So that all makes me want to say, be patient with the process. Be patient as you're developing meaningful hospitality. Get all the service points down. Put the spoon on the certain side of the saucer. Don't put your fingers on the rim. Pour latte art and give people a napkin. Hand it to them with both hands or something. I don't know what your thing is. There's a whole host of stuff you can think of to make it really beautiful and well done. But then it's going to take time as you apply that hospitality to that service for it to really take root. Okay, so now there's 4 levels of need that I think we should explore when it comes to hospitality. First, when we talk about this, we're not just talking about customers, by the way. Before jumping into the 4 levels of need, we should talk about how people that work for you deserve hospitality as well. And if you've signed up to be an operator, an owner of a coffee shop, you are the one who provides these things. You are a facilitator. You are an event manager. It just happens, if you're in a brick and mortar, that the event is every single day, all day long, nonstop, until you die. Not really, but if you're in a mobile situation, it's a lot more compartmentalized. It's a little bit more of an event. And so people are in an event mentality with that. It's a different set of rules with hospitality, in that it's a lot more focused and intense, but it's the same principles applied. So let's talk about the levels of need. And when you think about these things, think, how do I do this for my staff, as well as how do I do this for my customers, and train my staff to recognize these things and address them for my customers. First is human. We want to be what our friend Philip Paul Turner of Simple Powerful Hospitality fame, that past episode, recognized or acknowledged, welcomed, and included. You want to be accepted in the fold of people. You need to be welcomed in. You need to be seen as significant. That's ultimately what people want. They want to be seen as significant, to be validated in that their presence is celebrated, and that there's a twinkle in the eye of the person across from them, whether that's a coworker, your boss, or the customer, because they see them and they're like, oh, so and so is here. I'm so happy. And I will dedicate myself to serve the needs of that person while serving with them or while serving them. That's the kind of thing that I think is the high water, or it's the high mark for how welcoming people and acknowledging them, including them, and validating them is. That doesn't mean you approve of every single behavior that they do, because I think we get that whole validation thing mixed up. We still have this whole thing called accountability, okay? And we, at the same time, need to recognize people want us to be for them and to be on their side. And that's basic, okay? So that's the first human need that we have. Now, we go down to another level. Now, that human need is going to be a little bit differently addressed when it comes to who you are in this equation, whether you're the customer or the barista. Now, the customer and their human need across the counter is going to be addressed through the act of commerce, being a merchant, being somebody who provides coffee and answers questions, be an expert on their behalf, help them be successful in their stay, help them be successful in their experience, and maybe even at home with how they interact with your beans and all that stuff, right? So you are the facilitator of their success in all these different, both culinary and emotional ways. If it's a barista position, then there's other ways that you show hospitality and show that that person is somebody who you want to care for, is consistency and fairness, good communication, having great a feedback culture, being able to pay what you can and not what you can get away with, being transparent. There's so many things that you can talk about. An episode called Top 10 Ways to Lose Baristas or Lose Staff was a great one if you want to listen to that on the subject. But you have a different set of service points that you offer to your staff than you offer to your customers, but you can still provide those services and not be providing hospitality to them because your heart's not in it. You don't actually believe it. You're like, these freaking baristas, I just have to do this all stuff. It's not what I was, my generation didn't, whatever. And the customers, customers are so stupid. As long as they give me their money, I don't care, but they don't know what they're doing. And so you can't possibly be giving good hospitality if you've got that behind your eyeballs as you're like fake smiling out at them. And baristas, this goes for you too. I don't care if you're, just a beginning barista. You gotta tamp that fire behind your that impetuous fire behind your eyes out. I get it. You're just like, customers can say dumb things sometimes. Everyone does. Um, I'm so glad that I have not been recording every dumb thing I've ever said in my life. It just is the cognitive bias I have, is that I've forgotten all that stuff. So when somebody else says something dumb, I'm just like, what? What? Because I don't remember the stuff I did. But if you took a second, if you're brave enough, if you're like, if you want to do a whole never ending story thing and face yourself after you've passed the first oracle, you might run away screaming, just like Atreyu. Now, the position determines the kind of service, and then you want to have that hospitality. Now, next is the role of the person. So, the role of the person really is the staff member. The staff member is somebody who can operate the machine, they can do the POS, and they need to be shown how to do those things. They need to be shown by you that there is a way you have thought through that is the best way to make a line of drinks, to ring customers up. The POS is set up in such a way that is as easy as we possibly can make it to add different things to an order. Maybe you want to adjust an order for alternative milks and that kind of stuff. There are roles that baristas play in the shop that need to have been already thought through. That's a sign of hospitality. You say, welcome to this role. Here's what we have set up for you. It's a whole assortment of different SOPs and standards. And here's my cell phone number, or here's the Slack channel, and you can ask questions here. And we've got some training to help you. Now, this is how we show hospitality in a very narrowed down kind of way. So you've got this human person, right, that you're just respecting as a human. You're welcoming them in, and then as they are just onboarded, you're showing them through scheduling, through feedback, through other just service items to all your staff. This is what we do with all of our staff. This is how we keep our culture tight and thriving, by caring for the professional needs that you have. And then you go down a step further to the role and say, when you're on the POS, or when you're doing dishes, or when you're in the bakery, or wherever it is, here's more preparation to help you be successful. And now you get to the final point, which is individual. And that is basically the same thing in my mind as knowing your coffee really well. At this point, you have provided a great deal of service and hospitality, but at the end of the day, individuals have a different learning style, different preferences for how feedback is given to them. Some people want it just direct. They don't care if they're in public, they don't care about that kind of thing. So you can talk to them about that. Other people get fantastically embarrassed. They need to be told about stuff in private. You have to be a student of the individuals on your team. And that's the final level of niching down into needs and how hospitality and service and hospitality can actually help you in that order. You got to start with the basics of the human need, the position, who are they, and then the role they are playing at the moment, and then the individual. And when you have sort of studied and mapped that out and discovered all those things, you're going to be so much more likely to be able to care for them as a team and facilitate their effective training, and they will turn around and say they've been so well cared for that they're going to care for the customer better. So that's how meaningful hospitality can happen with these 4 levels of needs. Systems as care is the next thing that we talk about here. But before we talk about that, I do want to take a moment to mention our sponsors for today's episode. That is Arto Brick and also the Pacific Barista series. There is a lot of, I think, energy behind the physical space of a coffee bar. When you talk about stone and tile and something just solid and foundational, you want something unique like your coffee shop. I think Arto Brick is a great option, is one of the best ones out there because they focus on creating these unique spaces in cafes, in homes, in kitchens all over the world. And so go to arto.com, or better yet, go to their Instagram account at artobrick. Reach out to Armin and Elagian. Armin Elagian is a past guest on the show and a wonderful person and has a big heart for people and what we're all about, hospitality. So reach out on Instagram, DM them at artobrick, and let them help you create an amazing space with their tile and stonework and hard surfaces that they can provide for your coffee shop. Now, also, it is my pleasure to talk about the Pacific Barista series. The Barista series is the line of plant-based beverages that is developed by Pacific Foods. They have been doing this for, it feels like eons. I want to say eons. I like that word. But they're one of the OGs, right? They have been with the coffee industry since the beginning. That's why they are preferred by so many around the world for plant-based beverages. Stands up to the heat from steaming, great texture for latte art, taste is on point, focused on coffee. So go to pacificfoodservice.com and check them out. Get samples, taste it for yourself. And if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages for your customers, definitely try them. Pacific Barista Series. So everyone, systems as care. Systems as care is a saying that basically means when you create a system or an SOP, I don't care what it is, it's a way that something is done. That is you supporting your own intentions. So if you just have goals, okay, great. But if you don't have a strategy, if you haven't told me what you're going to do on Monday to reach your goal, you're not going to get there. You don't get the benefit of the aspiration without the action and the means to deliver that action. That's the system. So it is the support of the values-based intention. You have to have structure in place. So if you value communication, you say, we want to be good communicators. I'd say, where is your communication structure? What is the mind map or the workflow of that look like? Are you having one-on-ones on a regular basis? If so, what do those look like? What about team meetings? What's the agenda? How often are you communicating the updates on menu items or different prices with people that need to know about that stuff? The question is something that's hard to answer because sometimes we get into this mindset of, I'm just putting out fires, but I'm just throwing out ideas too, and I really just can't keep track of it all. It's hard to just sit down because it's all swirling above the head, and sometimes I just reach up and I randomly pull things down to address them when it becomes loud enough for me to address. This year, I hope, is the year where you will start to support your values with structures that make sure they happen amidst the chaos and the unknowns of business life. Without that, you are going to be subject to just the winds of change. Everything that comes in that door is going to throw your plans off. If you have no structure, then that's the definition of being fragile, right? You can't be resilient without structure. So having systems to back up your intentions, you have to have some non-negotiables. So those are your values, but the systems are meant to change as your business changes. So you might not ever get over this idea that you want to operate with integrity. But the means by which you accomplish integrity may change after you have 3 or 4 stores. And if that's the case, then, I mean, well, how could it? Well, there's more people. There's a different set of leadership that has to be accounted for. So the system might adjust in terms of frequency or who is in the meeting and who's not in the meeting, how we communicate. And I could kind of workshop this with some specific examples, but the point is that the system itself is not the value. We get that mixed up. It's the same thing that happens when people think that the reason that customers come to their coffee shop is because they have this fun and funky drink that they came up with. No, that's not it. And anybody who's going to go to Coffee Fest this year with glossy brochures galore, don't be sucked into the siren song. Have somebody tie you to the mast of your own ship as you pass by. Don't necessarily ignore them, because you can still hear the sirens when you're tied to the ship. It's just, don't just jump in like the sailors were wont to do. But a lot of people do. They jump in with this idea that the perfect system or the perfect menu item or something, that is the point. Having seen many different operating models of coffee shops, when people ask me in consulting conversations, we do a lot of discovery calls. One of the things that people ask is like, is this a viable model? My answer is usually yes, but it depends. You can tell me any kind of concept you want. Oyster coffee bar, you could probably make it work. There's a way to make it work. Well, we only have 10 square feet of space. I mean, well, then I don't know. But you get my drift here, is that it's more about the hospitality and the way you do things. Now, some things need to be in place. Of course, the metrics need to be there for you to be healthy, but the system itself, like, it is not the point. No, we have to do it this, we have to have this particular system, even though it doesn't work anymore for us. That's what we started with, and if we change it, then we're going to fail. That's not true. You have to have systems that help you accomplish your goal, and the goal and the value doesn't change. The goal might be to keep your labor within a particular percentage, or keep your cost of goods within a particular percentage, but the system for how you do that as you grow will have to change. It's just that simple. So keep that in mind. All right. Structures and systems are servants of values and people. So cultivating mutuality and co-creation is the last thing on the systems as care topic. Cultivating mutuality and co-creation means I am here for you, and I believe, therefore, that you can influence here. I think that you are part of how this place evolves. Nobody's cafe looks like their business plan 5 years from the day they open. It's usually in the middle of the Venn diagram of owner's intentions, community that comes in for coffee, and then the third is the staff who provide that service and facilitate that through the opportunity facilitated by the owner. So it's in the middle, that's your coffee shop. But you can't know those things because you don't have the staff yet when you're first starting. You don't know what the customer demographic technically is going to look like in the way they talk about your business to others or the things they purchase. So you just have to embrace this idea of co-creation. And meaningful hospitality happens when you allow people to help define the event itself. If I invite people over to my house and I am just this drill sergeant, like, no, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. And yeah, I have some rules, of course, but there's going to be a participation. There is this mingling. There is an energy and a flow to it that is unique unto itself. Your coffee shop is like that every single day. It has a flavor, it has a tone, it has a thing to it, but it's unique, and that's beautiful. And so, because of that, I mean, you can't escape it. By not helping people help you and allow them to, you're basically just denying what's happening already because they're having an influence no matter what. It's just you haven't embraced it and therefore can't see its full potential, which is kind of a shame. So, hospitality and meaningful hospitality means, you know, overcoming the idea that you're risking something by letting someone else influence the way things go in the shop. As long as it's not antithetical to the values, it may in fact help you fulfill your values in a better way. Now, follow through is the next thing I want to mention here. You, as the owner, are the one who demonstrates, you're like the archetype of a staff member. This is why we have an episode called Would You Hire You? If your job performance was put on the chopping block or up for scrutiny compared to the job performance of a barista, would you say you are a good communicator and that you're consistent? Like if your paperwork and everything else was a latte, would the latte be underfilled? How would the latte art look? Is it under temperature? You have to set an example, even though you might not be doing the same job right away, but in the beginning you might be doing all the jobs. But you get what I'm saying, is the idea is you set the example and you build trust through knowing that even though you technically could get away with it, and there is a lot of different, there's a lot of grace that people give you before they just bounce and they just leave. Actually, I'm going to go grab this book really quick, Unreasonable Hospitality, and I have this earmarked because I read it the other day. I thought, I really need to remember that. And it turns out right now is a great time. In a later chapter of the book called Scaling Culture, Will Guidara says of himself in learning hard lessons about, certain mistakes that he made. He says, what I didn't understand was that a solid culture can stand up to some degree of abuse before the wear begins to show. Even if morale slips significantly, the guests won't feel it right away. Our team had a lot of love for 11 Madison Park, and they took enormous personal and professional pride in providing spectacular hospitality. They were compartmentalizing and doing a good job of it, but with enough drips or basically infractions on, that grace that they were showing on his part, even the hardest rock is subject to erosion over time through enough drips. So you might say, almost in a subconscious way, you can see you're kind of getting away with being loosey goosey and just sloppy with the way that you're doing things. But then we wonder why we're going through so many employees. Okay, well, we apply the standard of excellence to our own performance, and now it starts to make sense. It's a hard pill to swallow. Okay, so now for the owner's role here, we're going to also talk about planned time and consistent application. So consistent application, first of all, I want to say is about you applying the standards of performance evenly across the staff. This has to do with bias. Sometimes it's hard for if you really love, the vibe of a certain barista and they do the same kind of bad thing that another barista that you don't like did, you're probably more likely going to police the actions of that one that you don't like before the one that you like, because you're like, but they're so great, they're such a great barista, and I don't know, I like them, they dress kind of cool and they always make the customers laugh, but boy, they really don't close very well. Meanwhile, the barista that doesn't make the customers laugh, that's not as cool as you think, they are equal, except you jump on them right away. So you're reticent to apply the same standard across the board because you haven't addressed your own bias in the equation. Giving guests in your house preferential treatment, if you're showing hospitality that way, well, it's going to make other guests feel pretty ignored. And Bruce Tulgan talks about this all the time, where the high performers are ignored and the low performers are allowed to perform poorly and hide out. Middle performers are, just kind of camping, but they're also seeing all of this happen, and they're probably the ones that are more likely to bounce and then the high performers. But the point is, you have to have consistent application of your standards and your care and hospitality across the board to all customers too, not just the customers that love. In fact, sometimes the customers that you're very familiar with, they're the ones that get the least degree of hospitality because the overfamiliarity you have with them causes you to forget that they are still your customer. Okay. That familiarity, does it breed contempt? Maybe. And I've seen some weird situations where that one regular who's in every day, they get the short end of the stick sometimes with hospitality. Now, I'm not saying that they need the exact same service every single day, but we got to have a freshened perspective and make sure that we're not falling into these traps, because the business itself is easy for us to sort of lose ourselves in the work. That's why we have to be examining ourselves and reflecting and meditating on these things and thinking, how is this month going to go? And how's this quarter going to go? How are we doing? That's how we find ourselves. It's the you are here on the map thing. When you're a leader, it's easy to seek perfectionism in yourself, or try to seem like you know everything, but you have to do a few things. You got to be willing to say, I'm sorry and that I don't know. And we're going to discover it together, or I'm going to find out for you, or I'm sorry and I'm going to work on it. And here's how I'm going to work on it. It's fine to do those things because it actually inspires people to do the same. When they mess up or they don't know, I would never want a staff member to say, yes, I know that, if they don't. Or I wouldn't want them to pretend they're perfect because I want them to improve. That just isn't how you do it. So when we're talking about meaningful hospitality, we have to be somebody who is resourceful, and that, I guess the term might be somebody who is on a journey with other people toward a thing that they all value, not somebody who has pretended to just arrive there and is scorning everybody else for not being where they are. Now, maintenance and curation is the last point I'm going to make here. Maintenance and curation. So, one thing that, on top of resourcing your staff, you have to do is you've got to learn how to artfully restore people to a certain standard of operation and hospitality. When I give my clients a sort of I call it an accountability form. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4 strikes, you're out kind of document. Like, how do we hold people accountable? It's stated in the document that this is a restoration process. You have invited this person, this staff member of yours. Now we're talking about staff. You've invited them to this place to work for you because you think they have potential, or you know they have potential, and you didn't hire them for no reason, hopefully. And so if they do something you don't like, well, then it makes sense to help them and to restore them. Now, you can be a barista and just refuse the help and just not respond to it. And that's what we have steps for. That's why we have a structure there for. We're protecting the hospitality is just as important as providing it. I'm not going to allow a guest to be rude to my other guests. If somebody is double dipping, I'm just kidding. But get what I'm saying is that there is a little bit of a protection that has to happen. But I think more of that happens through an attempt towards restoration that does, yes, have some consequence attached to it. And you'll probably find that some people, they will respond to it, and it'll be good because you showed patience. They were just having a bad day, Or, I've seen it where people, they do a 180, they turn around because they were given the opportunity to fix what they did wrong. I'm grateful for people who allowed me to fix what I did wrong because they believed in me. Okay. So there's this idea of hire slow, fire fast. Depends on what you're firing for, or how you've actually calculated your own culpability in this process. It's never just so easy as this hire slow, fire fast thing, right? We've got to think through how it looks to other people as well. To artfully handle this is to affirm that they have the ability to remain, in the on staff, right? To do so also with a guest who is upset is to give them grace and say, I'm going to call you up into the higher version of yourself through this conversation. And I've seen people turn around that way too. Now, certain guests I've had to kick out of the cafe pronto because they got worse. They got speech got bad and they got violent, they didn't like punch me or something. But had I not kicked them out, who knows? It might have happened, or I've seen it happen to coworkers or to my bosses. So your approach, though, has to be one of affirmation of, I believe that you have the ability to work with me as I help you up to this level of where I think we can still have you as a guest, or we can still have you as a staff member. But protecting the hospitality environment is still part of providing one. When it comes to meaningful hospitality, the other thing about curating it, I think, is that you have to tune into the lesser known metrics of emotional, just emotional response, I suppose. I guess when you walk into a cafe, the feeling you get when the cafe is not really a great cafe. It's a weird feeling. It's an eerie feeling. Like everyone's just really upset, disengaged. There's not that crackle in the air. And at a place where people love each other and they love what they do and they're providing great hospitality, you can feel it. What is that? If Square could get their hands on what that was and represent it on a graph, you'd be staring at it all day, because that's the kind of thing you would want to have in your cafe. Like, well, our electric air graph is not where it should be, and people aren't feeling the vibe as much. Our vibe numbers are down, y'all. Well, you could kind of have that internally and figure out how to enter into that mode. Just not to sound like woo woo about this, but really it should be a part of how you judge success of your business alongside the other needed metrics. And that also goes for how people feel on staff. If everyone's just deathly quiet, they're never talking to you, you feel like they're gossiping, they're a little, like, isolated, and things aren't getting done, I got news for you. There's something festering there. Something is going on. It might, yeah, maybe it's not the right hire, but maybe the culture has taken a sour turn, and that's a cause for concern. That's a metric. That's how you know something, right? So numbers are important, but feel is also very important, and you can fix those things only if you recognize them. So the last thing we'll say here, you need to be able to learn about how you operate as a hospitality provider. You're going to learn as you go. You're going to be better at this 5 years from now. You're going to be a different person. Even if you've been operating for years, people have been operating businesses for 10, 15 years. 5-year chunk goes by again, year 20, they're really still kind of the same, but they're still going to have evolved. And part of evolving means letting go. Some of your preconceptions of what you thought were absolutely needed didn't turn out to be needed as much as you thought. And it's okay. It doesn't make you a lesser operator. And the things you bought for your guests to have in your house, you got these fancy, sodas, and everyone's just drinking water. Like, what? I got these fancy sodas. I'm a terrible host. No, you were just hedging your bets. And turns out not everybody wants that, grape flavored drink or whatever it is. And that's what it's like to have missed sometimes with an offering you give to your staff or to your customers, but you just let go of it. Next time, maybe you have the same people over, don't have the grape soda because they didn't really like it that much. And so that is a part of growing. You have to grow into the next version of yourself, and don't try to hang on to the past so much. Hang on to your identity and allow your identity to evolve over time. Like I said, non negotiables that are served by systems that change to preserve the value of those values in the business. It serves people. And ultimately, this whole talk today is about, meaningful hospitality. This is how you find meaning. It's an evolving thing, and getting yourself deep into the weeds with this conversation today. Maybe you're taking notes, or maybe you're going to find the show notes have the links for different episodes. Maybe that will help you. I hope you do, because it's a lifestyle. It's something we're all a part of. That's how we're going to win in specialty coffee. I'm convinced we are at a point now in specialty coffee where we done did all the stuff with machines. Okay. There's not much more you could do with an espresso machine that's going to make any kind of a difference, meaningful difference in the success of your coffee shop. I will draw a line in the sand and say, like, enough. We're fine. Okay. What we need is meaningful hospitality, innovate towards one another, down into the ground, deeper roots, more meaningful things. I'm all about it. So that's it for today's episode. If you have any questions or comments, feedback, just email chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in the key holder coaching groups coming up in March, a new cohort is opening up. Email chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, that is the end of our show. I really thank you for being here, and I hope that this was a meaningful time indeed. And I also hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.